Let's stay with politics now. It seems like there's a lot of challenges, and these are challenging times for the governing party. Not only are there concerns over the lack of service delivery, the country finds itself sitting in the dark and without water for days. Add to that concerns about corruption within the government. Recently, the president and his leadership came under the spotlight as his predecessors criticized him, going as far as calling him corrupt. That's over the robbery at his Palapala farm. Millions in foreign currency were stolen at the farm. What does this mean for the African National Congress Party and the president, especially ahead of the 55th National Elective Conference coming up in December? Well, let's speak to political analyst Sandile Swana, who joins me now virtually to discuss this further. Mr. Swana, thank you very much for your time. It was quite strange, of course, at least for me, to see so many of the former presidents of the ANC speaking, but also are we not finding ourselves, particularly with former President Jacob Zuma and former President Thabo Mbeki, having to listen to people who don't see what wrong they did? They always want to talk about what wrong the current president is doing, but they always don't want to be challenged about some of the mistakes they made during their tenures.
Yes, unfortunately for Cyril Ramaphosa, we are now not living in 2006 or 2005 when Mbeki was president. We are living in 2022 with enormous electricity blackouts, enormous water shedding, escalating crime. So the current situation, which unfortunately for Cyril Ramaphosa, his track record of performance is in any case worse than that of Jacob Zuma, worse than that of Thabo Mbeki. So he is in a very unfortunate and an unenviable position. Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma, Thabo Mbeki has got a better track record in the economy and in turning around the economy mainly, and a certain degree of good governance. Jacob Zuma has got a dismal record in terms of good governance. He has got a poorer track record on the economy. But none of them, of course, as you correctly point out, is prepared to admit readily their errors. There are errors that Thabo Mbeki did admit in other interviews elsewhere.
So are you saying that, President Cyril Ramaphosa is just not basically in a fair position at the moment because he faces an economy that is also fighting international issues such as your Russia-Ukraine? He also came in when we had COVID-19 and the lockdown, etc., and ESCOM becoming worse than it really was. Did he inherit what was already a decaying country?
There is no president who came into power under favorable conditions. When Thabo Mbeki took over as president under Mandela, deputy president, and then as president in his own right, the country was in junk status. The treasury was bankrupt. It was the worst of the worst times, really. So he had to do a lot to pull the country out of the mud, and he did that successfully. When Zuma was trying to take over power, it was the 2008 collapse, economic collapse, worldwide collapse. So there is no president who did not enter power with a deep, serious crisis. The only difference between the three presidents, if you want to call them that three, is that Cyril Ramaphosa has not managed to navigate his own crisis, the crisis of his time successfully, which was the COVID-19 crisis. And there are many nations that have made a complete success of the COVID-19 recovery by them.
Just to help me understand, Mr. Swana, the outrage around what former President Thabo Mbeki said, he was quoted all over the media saying that the Palapala farm gate is going to be very challenging for the current president. And I thought that that was absolutely right. It is something that is going to be very challenging. It's going to go against his reputation, etc. So maybe just explain to me and help me understand why there was outrage around that part of what he said.
Bear in mind that You know, there are people that we consider to be neutral, such as Mavuso Msimang, or relatively neutral, Mavuso Msimang being one of them, who had already advised that the president must step aside a little while back anyway. Now, there is this impeachment that is coming up, possible impeachment that could come out of these lawyers who are meeting to discuss whether Cyril is facing this. Now, the politics of the ANC right now is that there are people who feel that Cyril is an angel, Cyril Ramaphosa is an angel who is holy, who must be protected at all costs. I cannot readily think that there's any other reason why people would be upset about Thabo Mbeki raising the specter of a possible impeachment of Cyril Ramaphosa, other than the fact that they want to maintain a fake angelic posture and picture of Cyril Ramaphosa, who is not an angel, actually.
After the fact that the three former presidents spoke, and of course there was also reaction from KZN, for instance, which surprised a lot of people because they were seemingly coming out to protect Cyril Ramaphosa, asking the former leaders to refrain from commenting against the president, etc. When he then suddenly announced that he's going to be addressing the nation a little later on about state capture, especially after former President Jacob Zuma called state capture fraud, do you think he was in a way responding publicly?
I wouldn't say so, because there was also a deadline for him to meet. And another two things, I mean, the one that could be then accused of one thing or the other is Jacob Zuma, who actually called a press conference. Yeah. My understanding is that the remarks that are being quoted about Thabo Mbeki and Kgalema Motlanthe, it was lectures and presentations at a workshop. These are not people who went and called a press conference to say this, that, and the other. It was within a context of a presentation and discussing intellectual. It was an intellectual discourse, which every South African is allowed to do. But the question of whether KZN is necessarily defending Cyril Ramaphosa right now, I think can be questioned, can be raised as a question as well. Yes. Because what they are saying, which is basically the same thing that Bathabile Dlamini was saying at a much, much earlier date, that these things must be handled, and Lindwe Sisulu said the same thing. These things must be handled within the structures of the African National Congress. And even Cyril himself must submit himself to the structures of the African National Congress and ask the ANC to help him out of the mess that is in the same way that Jacob Zuma came to the ANC when he was charged for the arms deal and the rape and other things. And the Secretary General of the ANC, Kgalema Motlanthe at the time, set up two committees to rescue Jacob Zuma from the justice system. So Cyril must know that he can submit his problems to the ANC. So these ones are being asked to say, even if you have a concern, Thabo Mbeki, even if you have a concern, Kgalema Motlanthe, if you have a concern, Jacob Zuma, submit everything. All of you must submit things, and let's deal with these things inside the ANC. Because Limpopo and KZN are trying to save the sinking boat of the African National Congress. They are not necessarily trying to save Cyril.
Yes, I think they are really trying to save how the ANC looks to the electorate at the moment. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I still wanted to ask you about what the president said last night. But thank you so much, and thank you for your patience while you waited to speak to us. That is political analyst Sandile Swana speaking.